Hello and welcome. So today I've received my EggTimer Apogee flight computer. So I'm going to be going through the components here as well as the assembly of this product. So the EggTimer Apogee is a very simple flight computer from EggTimerRocketry.com. This is a simple device that just does basically two functions. First off, it ejects your parachute with a pyro charge at apogee, and at the end of the flight it beeps out your total rocket height for that launch. It has no memory or logging capability, so you're not going to get speed over time, you're not going to get altitude over time. It simply is an ejection and total altitude system. So this is a do-it-yourself kit. So what you get is the circuit board and all the individual components. It's all through-hole mounting, so if you're familiar with basic soldering technique, this should not be a very difficult project. The only component that I see that is pre-installed is the barometric sensor. And it comes with a little packet of solder and just a basic parts list. Other than that, the instructions for assembly are available on their website. Here I've got a couple of other parts that I purchased at the same time from the same company for this project. The first is a single cell LiPo battery, and that's going to be to power the chip as well as to power the ejection charge. The second is this tiny little LiPo battery charger. Allows me to connect a USB connector and charge the LiPo battery. And then they had an optional data cable. I believe this is going to be used after the assembly to test the chip. The chip has no data logging, so you're not going to be downloading any data off of the chip. So this is just for testing purposes. I also chose to purchase the EggTimer Apogee Easy Mount Kit. Now I'm not really sure if I'm going to be using this in my rocket, but I just thought it seemed like a neat product and I was going to give it a try, even if I have to retrofit it to fit into my larger rockets. It basically comes with a couple of plastic parts here that get assembled. This holds the Apogee chip and it also holds the LiPo battery. There's a little packet of screws and hardware. A little cardboard tube and a little strip of wire, as well as just the parts list. Now when you receive the product, it doesn't come with any manuals or instructions, so you do have to get everything from the EggTimer website. Just to make this easier, I printed off the PDF documents. First thing I got here is the EggTimer Apogee assembly manual. That was 25 pages. I also printed off the EggTimer Apogee User's Guide. I won't need this until the product's done, but I will eventually need that. That was 15 pages. And then this is the assembly manual for the EggTimer Apogee Easy Mount assembly that holds the circuit and the battery. Here's all the components laid out for the EggTimer Apogee circuit. Now for time constraints, I'm not going to go through the entire assembly of this. The manual is very well laid out and very well illustrated with all the details you'll need to assemble it. You do definitely need to have some basic soldering skills before you start this project. Alright, so the assembly is complete. The manual says to do a preliminary test and listen for a certain beep sequence. So I've got the battery hooked up and I'm going to close the screw switch. So as best I can tell from the manual, that seems to be what it's supposed to do. So we're going to go ahead and hook up the serial diagnostics cable. There's a couple of pieces of software, a driver, and another piece of software that the manual makes a reference to. We're going to go ahead and install those, and we're going to check out the diagnostics on the computer. So I've downloaded the USB to serial bridge driver and the PuTTY terminal emulator software. I'm going to go ahead and install both those items. When you open the PuTTY terminal emulator software, it's not really immediately obvious what you need to do, but here's a screenshot of the first configuration screen that comes up. You need to select the serial option, and the speed defaulted to 9600, and that's what you need. Now, as far as the serial line, that can be a variety of different things. What you need to do, you need to open up the device manager and look for this section called ports. Open that up and find the prolific USB to serial COM port, and it'll have the COM port listed beside that. So for this one here, it's COM3. So you see in my PuTTY configuration, I needed to put in COM3. And then you just click open. From there, the instructions in the user manual are pretty self-explanatory. And then here's a screenshot of the data I got from the chip after turning it on. The first one, 03786, so that's my current altitude above sea level, which for where I live is pretty accurate. Number 2 is all zeros. That indicates that I don't have anything on the output channel, which is correct because I don't have a igniter on the output channel right now. Then the version number is number 3, which is 10207. And then line number 4 is 104 or 104, indicating that everything's okay. So everything looks good here. And the last thing that the manual says I should do is a vacuum test. And I'm going to go ahead and do that, but it says that it's easier to do when the chip is already installed in the easy mount. So at this point, I'm going to set this aside and go ahead and assemble the easy mount. This is everything that was included in the easy mount kit. It's 4 small plastic pieces, a little cardboard tube, some screws, nuts, and washers, a small Allen wrench to go along with those, and a little piece of wiring. I'm not going to go through the whole assembly of this because the instructions are quite well laid out and they have good illustrations. So I'm just going to go ahead and assemble this and install the Apogee chip into the assembly. Now that the construction is finished, the last thing we need to do is a vacuum test. So I'm going to take one of my little E-matches that we use for the ejection charge, and attach that onto our terminals. I'm ready to do the vacuum test, but before I do, I want to cover a little bit of information about the beeping sequences that the chip is going to make, because I don't think it's very well explained in the manual. So I'm going to activate the chip, and what we're going to get is a long beep for about 2 seconds. After that, it'll beep out a series of beeps that identify the altitude flight of the previous launch. Now, the information it's beeping out right now is just false information because I already did a vacuum test earlier while I was testing this chip. So this information isn't of any value. When I first powered up the chip and it didn't have any launch information, it just beeped 10 times and then it repeated that 3 times. After that, it goes into this slow beeping mode, and I'll let that beep a couple of times so you can hear it. This is a pre-flight mode. It's very important that you note that you cannot launch the rocket when it's doing this slow beep sequence. It will do this for 55 seconds. This is your pre-flight time to do things like putting your nose cone on, or if your flight computer is in an electronics bay that needs to be assembled into the rocket, that's when you're assembling that into the rocket, getting it on the launch pad if you haven't already, and putting the ignition system into the motor. This slow beep sequence is pre-flight. You cannot launch during this sequence. At the end of that 55 seconds, we hear a long beep that lasts for about 2 to 3 seconds, and then it goes into this mode where it's doing a fast chirp. This is launch capable. So this is when you would launch the rocket. I'm going to go ahead and do the vacuum test, and we should see the igniter go off. So as you can see, it went off just fine, and now it's beeping altitude information that normally on a launch would be the total altitude above the launch pad that you achieved. So this seems to be working great.